Hello, welcome to Conscious Quilting. I'm John. Today we're going to be talking about some tips and strategies for figuring out what kind of quilting to put into your quilt, how to design the quilting for your quilt. And it's one of the bigger challenges for any quilt maker is figuring out how that quilt should be quilted. And any quilt maker at any level, some will struggle more than others with this, obviously, and some quilts will be more challenging to design quilting for than others. So I thought it would be interesting to go through my process for designing and coming up with quilting for a quilt on one particular block, and that's what I'm going to be focused on today. Now, we've all had quilts that we all just kind of want to send to the long armor and just let them worry about it. Even I, have made quilt tops that I was like, I don't even want to think about this. I want to give it to somebody else and let them figure out the quilting, because I've got other projects to do and I've got classes to teach and I just don't have time to fret over this particular quilt. It was just something I threw together and I'd be happy just to have it edge to edge quilted, and that's the end of it. And to not be the one to do it. That's perfectly valid. There's nothing wrong. Please support your local long armors. There are people out there who do long arm quilting and that is their full-time job. And they need your support. They need your quilts. So there's nothing wrong with that. I support that 150%. But for those of you who want to quilt your own quilts and are struggling with how to deal with quilt as desired, that's what this video is for. And hopefully we'll have a few more videos coming in the coming weeks or months with different quilt blocks that will deal with this very subject and come up with different design ideas off these different blocks, just to kind of familiarize you with the process. Just like in free motion quilting itself as a skill set, learning to design the quilting or choose the quilting for your quilt is a skill set in and of itself. And it's something just like free motion quilting that comes more naturally to some people than to others, but I do believe that everybody can do it with practice. Again, it's just like doing the actual quilting, getting that quilt on your sewing machine. You can do it, but you got to practice to do it. And it's the same thing with choosing your designs. So we're going to be focusing on a particular block that was provided to me by an associate of mine who is a marvelous piecer and a master of color. And I had requested a big block to work with for this video, and he came through with flying colors. And so we're going to take a look at that, and I'm going to talk about some different design ideas for it and how I got there, which is the point of the video, is like how the brain process works for that. And hopefully you will find it helpful. So thanks for joining me, and let's get cracking. So today's block comes from a book called Barnstar Sampler by Shelley Cavanna. It's been on the market for about a year and is available in fine quilt shops everywhere. Go pick up a copy. It is an excellent book with some wonderful blocks in it and really clear, concise instructions. So I think you'll really enjoy it. This block is the Diamond Star block from that book. And when I first looked at this block and got done oohing and eyeing over it, the first thing that caught my eye was the negative spaces. That's usually the first thing that I look at in a quilt or a quilt block. Where's the negative space? Because that's where the special treatment is going to come into the quilt if I'm going to custom quilt it. So let's take the borders away and look at those negative spaces. I've marked in the diagram the negative spaces that I am focusing on. You have the outside setting triangles, you have the inside triangles, and then the corners. We're going to start off focusing on those setting triangles because that was the first thing that caught my eye. Now, different things will catch your eye when you're looking at a quilt and its negative spaces, but the negative space really helps you to see what kind of quilting needs to go in there. It's a different way of looking at the quilt. We usually wind up looking at the piecing first, but when we're in quilter mode, we need to look at the space around the piecing. We need to look at that negative space. That is a very powerful place in any piece of art, and that is where we're focused right now. So focusing in on that setting triangle, when I see a setting triangle, I tend to want to put a feather in it. It's just my way. I don't think I'm capable of walking past a quilt and not putting a feather in it somewhere. So I decided that I would go ahead and put a feather into each of the setting triangles on the sides just before the border. I thought it would be a nice place for it. And one of the things that I like about feathers, of course, is that they fill a space very easily. You can shape them to fill any space. So it's a go-to for me. Coming back out, here's where I started to have an issue and a challenge. The corners. You have a very oddly shaped negative space there to fill with quilting. And I was in feather mode and I overdid it. I looked at this and I drew this up and I thought it was beautiful and I was kind of focused in on it for a little while. But the reality is this area is a 6-inch by 6-inch area. That is way too much quilting to put into that space and too much work for too little return. So I had to go back to the drawing board on that one. And I did. And I decided I wanted to do something much cleaner, much simpler, and something that would be more accessible for my students and my viewers. So I decided, okay, I'm going to break out the ruler and do some straight lines, 1/4 inch offset with a couple of curves in there, and boom, that's what I came up with. So I decided to audition that in that corner, and I love it. I think that's going to work really, really well to define the space and give it a lovely bit of quilting without overdoing it. Coming back to the negative space, let's look at the center. I decided for the center, since it's a square in a square in a square, I'm just going to go ahead and go with the theme, and I'm going to do 4 squares of quilting inside of that, where it's kind of offset from the square in a square block. And I think that's going to tie that together nicely. Again, these are going to be very simple, clean, straight lines, a 1/4 inch offset from the seam, nothing too difficult and nothing too flashy. I don't want to take away from the quilt. I just want to accentuate it. Looking at the overall block, I know there's going to be a lot of ditch work done on this. There's going to be a lot of stitch in the ditch. I'm going to want to emphasize both of the stars that are in this block. There are actually 2, not just 1. But then I'm also going to want to have some offset quilting, not just the ditch work, but some offset ditching. So again, I'm coming in a 1/4 inch from the seam. And you can see in the 4 squares, the white diamonds around. I'm going to do 4 offset ditches there. Once I get this quilt quilted, this is 24 by 24, so it's a big block. Once I get it all quilted in the center, then I'm going to need to focus on the borders. That's going to be a whole other video because that's a whole other topic of conversation. Overall, a lot of people ask me where I, get my inspiration for my quilting. And the fact is, some of the inspiration comes from the fabrics that are used in the quilt itself. I'll look to the prints that are there to get some ideas. Some of my ideas just kind of come out of the blue. They come out of the negative space, and I'll just have an idea pop in there And you kind of have to let yourself daydream and kind of communicate with the quilt. You know, you have to listen to the fabrics and listen to the piecing, listen to the space that's there in the quilt. But I'll also go out in nature and look at trees, and I'll look at leaves, and I'll go and I'll look at architecture. I'll go into the city and I'll look at old architecture and look for some ideas from there. Inspiration is all around you. You just have to open your eyes and see it. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Have a blessed day.